16. Raphael Rivera. In a disturbing road rage case coming out of Palm Coast, Florida that went viral in May 2022, 50-year-old Raphael Rivera was accused of starting a heated confrontation by cutting off a couple on a motorcycle and throwing something at them. The 50-year-old motorcycle driver, known as GP, then followed the truck to a nearby intersection where Rivera allegedly got out of the vehicle with a knife in hand. Afraid that things were about to turn ugly, GP prepared himself for a confrontation with a set of brass knuckles. In a video captured by GP's wife on her cell phone, Rivera was heard telling GP that brass knuckles are illegal. GP's wife then responded by pointing at Rivera's knife and sarcastically yelling, "And that's legal?" The men went on to call each other names and exchange heated words as they slowly moved toward one another during their tense standoff. Rivera swung his knife at GP, who then pulled a handgun out and ordered Rivera to put the weapon down. The video ended with Rivera calling 911 and complaining that someone pulled a gun on him, while GP's wife yelled in the background of the call about how Rivera had made the first move by swinging his knife. 6 911 calls were made in total, and Rivera seemed to think that the crowd of bystanders who watched everything unfold would vouch in his favor, but that wasn't actually the case. After speaking with several witnesses and reviewing the footage carefully, Flagler County deputies arrested Rivera on suspicion of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. 15. Morris Mayo. A disagreement that broke out between drivers in Fairhope, Alabama, escalated into a life-threatening situation that ended in gunfire in June 2019. According to police reports, 23-year-old Morris Mayo and the driver of a red hatchback were arguing outside their cars when the hatchback driver suddenly jumped on top of Mayo's vehicle and stomped on the windshield, causing it to shatter. Mayo allegedly then grabbed a gun from inside the car and pointed it at the other driver. He was later charged with carrying a pistol without a permit. In a separate case that took place about a month earlier, the young man was accused of punching another man in the face. While the outcomes of the cases are still unclear, records show that Mayo is not currently incarcerated in the state prison system. 14. Janelle Evans. Teen mom star Janelle Evans has gotten into her fair share of trouble over the years, mostly thanks to her short temper and complicated personal life. In one of the many hot-headed incidents the young woman's made headlines for, she was accused of following another driver to his home in North Carolina and threatening him with a gun back in 2018. This happened after he allegedly tailgated and brake-checked her on a highway. After getting to the residence, the then 26-year-old got out of her car and snapped a few photos of the other driver, Robert Robinson Jr., and his pickup truck. While a large portion of the encounter was caught on video by Janelle's dashcam, the footage didn't show the exact moment when she was accused of approaching Robinson's house with a gun in hand. As she was leaving the scene, she accidentally backed up into the man's mailbox. Robinson got into his truck and tried to block Evans in the driveway until police arrived, but she managed to drive around him before leaving the scene. He later told TMZ that Janelle was lucky nobody shot her, as he alerted neighbors that there was a crazy woman in his driveway. While Robinson claimed to have his own gun in his truck, he said he chose not to take it out when he noticed that Janelle's son was in the car with her during the encounter. Evans claimed she went into mother bear mode when Robinson brake-checked her, but following him was arguably much more dangerous than simply calling the police or disengaging from the situation entirely and carrying on with her day. She also reported suffering from PTSD as a result of the altercation, but to many, the incident was just another clear example of how the young woman's poor decisions have caused her to lose custody of her children. 13. Dave Shelton. In 2021, a calm Saturday afternoon in Phoenix, Arizona erupted into chaos when police dispatchers started receiving calls about an angry driver deliberately crashing into other vehicles at an intersection. Bystander footage showed a driver ramming his black sedan into a silver car at a red light, causing damage to its back bumper. The owner of the vehicle that was hit could be seen jumping on the hood of the offending car and stomping on the windshield before jumping off and going back into the road. Moments later, the black car sped up and struck the man, who luckily avoided serious injuries. A witness named Michelle Gibbons told the Arizona Republic that the driver of the black car, 40-year-old Dave Shelton, almost hit a different vehicle at first. She said that the suspect started yelling at the driver when the man in the silver car shouted and told him to calm down, at which point Shelton walked over to the silver vehicle and punched the driver square in the face. The confrontation quickly devolved into the violent interaction that was caught on camera, and Shelton allegedly struck 2 other cars after leaving the intersection. Police were able to arrest the suspect not long after on suspicion of aggravated driving under the influence, aggravated assault, failure to provide information, and violating probation. 12. Jay on Shelton. A drive home from work along an Indianapolis highway took a horrific turn for 25-year-old Macy Wesley in May 2023, when she accidentally got a little too close to a fellow driver. Wesley had just merged onto Interstate 465 at the start of rush hour when a white Hyundai Sonata with temporary plates brake-checked her multiple times. She simply assumed the car was slowing down due to traffic up ahead and reduced her own speed to give the driver more space. She then noticed that the 2 people in the car kept looking back at her, causing her to become easy, fearing that something was about to go wrong. Moments later, a young man in the car ahead stuck his head and upper body out the sunroof and pointed a gun towards Wesley while waving at her to slow down. At a time when road rage incidents in Indiana were on the rise, the young woman was used to other drivers occasionally yelling or giving her the middle finger, but she never dreamed that someone would actually pull a gun on her, causing her to fear for her life when she was simply trying to get home from work. The entire incident was caught on dash cam footage, which showed the Hyundai moving into the right lane and slowing down until Wesley was driving alongside the car. Her dash cam was still recording as the back driver's side window rolled down. The same man stuck his head out the window, causing Wesley to worry he was going to shoot her or the car. She tried her best to stay calm and avoid giving the man any reason to pull the trigger. Thankfully, the encounter ended just moments later with no serious injuries. Wesley turned the dashcam footage over to state police, who appealed to the public for help identifying the suspect. 3 months later, authorities finally charged 18-year-old Jay on Shelton with pointing a firearm and intimidation with a deadly weapon. Shelton allegedly admitted to being the person in the video, but denied having any memory of getting angry at another driver. He claimed that if he pulled a gun, he must have thought he was in danger. But the young man also admitted to firing shots at another driver 6 days after the incident involving Wesley, indicating that he might have a serious road rage problem. This also cast doubt on his claim that he would only draw his weapon out of fear. 11. Tyler Harding. In July 2023, investigators traced a recently stolen Jeep to a McDonald's drive-thru in Charlotte, North Carolina. Officers went to the location to talk with the suspect, 26-year-old Tyler Harding, but he apparently wasn't in the mood to have any serious discussions. Clad in a cowboy hat and jeans, the shirtless Texas resident quickly sped off, marking the start of what would amount to a nearly 3-hour-long chase against Mecklenburg County. In the first of 3 carjackings that happened during the pursuit, Harding eventually ditched the Jeep and stole a white pickup truck, at which point his sister got in the car with him and came along for the ride. The suspect proceeded to drive to a nearby Walmart, where he crashed the truck and left his sister behind in the parking lot. He then stole a beige car and continued to run away, reaching dangerously high speeds as he drove over curbs, sidewalks, and medians, weaved in and out of traffic, and barreled down busy roads while driving in the wrong direction. Harding totaled the 3rd stolen vehicle after speeding through an intersection and hitting another sedan head-on. The driver, who was 7 months pregnant at the time, was stopped at a red light when the felon plowed into her front end. He stole a black SUV and continued the chase for another 25 minutes before speeding through another intersection and T-boning a pickup truck. Apparently tired of the situation he'd gotten himself into, Harding finally surrendered and was taken into custody. Miraculously, nobody was seriously injured throughout the entire chase, even the pregnant woman. Harding was originally charged with 31 crimes, including 13 felonies, 8 misdemeanors, and 10 traffic violations. In 2023, he pleaded guilty to felony counts of hit and run causing injury, fleeing to elude, breaking and entering, larceny, and several car theft charges. According to court records, he's serving a 3.5-year prison sentence and will become eligible for release in mid-2024. 10. Joshua Taylor Stokes. In November 2023, law enforcement agents in North Carolina received a 911 call from a woman who said that she'd been carjacked by her ex-boyfriend and that her captor was not letting her get out of the vehicle. At the time, the victim had an active order of protection out against 36-year-old Virginia Beach resident Joshua Taylor Stokes, stemming from previous domestic incidents. According to authorities, Stokes abducted the victim from Virginia. Police tracked the purple Dodge Challenger using several phone pings and tried to pull the car over, but the driver refused to obey. Stokes allegedly drove up to 146 miles per hour in a 65-mile-per-hour zone, while leading officers on a dangerous pursuit that spanned 4 counties. The chase finally ended when Stokes lost control of the vehicle while exiting the highway and crashed into a guardrail. Both parties sustained minor injuries and Stokes was charged with kidnapping, reckless driving, fleeing to elude, driving while impaired, and felonious restraint. He also has an ongoing criminal case out of Currituck County for felony fleeing to elude and reckless driving. Hopefully, the court will clearly recognize the danger that the victim was put in and will impose an appropriate punishment on this man. 9. Jerry Wyatt and Joshua Livesay. Greensboro, North Carolina resident Pete Denny was minding his own business driving along a highway in Guilford County one morning in February 2022 when he noticed a white van recklessly chasing a black Mazda sedan. He managed to grab his phone and record the tail end of the unlawful pursuit, which lasted for a total of 10 miles. The footage showed the white work van weaving between several lanes, whipping around other cars, and driving on the shoulder at dangerously high speeds, almost causing several accidents. Meanwhile, the Mazda driver continued to speed up in a desperate attempt to throw the van driver off his trail. When bluffing that he was pretending he was getting ready to exit the highway failed, the motorist threw a beverage at the van as it passed. The van driver got directly in front of the Mazda and slammed on the brakes, forcing the driver to veer toward the median and come to a sudden stop. At that same exact moment, a nearby police officer in an unmarked car appeared behind the van and turned his lights on. Denny was heard cheering in the video as the erratic driver's antics were finally brought to an end. The driver, 62-year-old Jerry Ray Wyatt, was charged with failure to maintain lane control and reckless driving. The Mazda driver, 25-year-old Joshua Ian Livesay, was hit with the same charges despite looking like the victim in the situation. Speaking with the ID channel series Road Rage, Denny said that the longer the chase went on, the more aggressive the drivers became. In the video, he was heard laughing about the pursuit before taking a more serious tone and expressing his fear that the van driver was going to accidentally end up killing someone. 8. Curtis Kimbra. 42-year-old Curtis Kimbra had been out of prison just under 6 months after serving time for kidnapping 2 women at gunpoint in 2022. What would eventually turn into a high-speed pursuit spanning 3 counties started out in Osceola County, where police received reports that Kimbra abducted a woman and her friend, one of whom was suffering from a gunshot wound. By the time law enforcement got to the scene of the alleged kidnapping in Okeechobee, the suspect and his captives were already long gone. Deputies spoke with a witness who identified one of the hostages as a friend of Kimbra and the other as the woman's roommate. Investigators later learned that Kimbra dragged his friend out of the house, prompting her roommate to come outside to try and help her escape. A be on the lookout notice was quickly issued to nearby law enforcement agencies, and Kimbra's vehicle was eventually spotted in neighboring Indian River County. Officers from several different agencies joined in the pursuit, hitting speeds as high as 112 miles per hour. they were going too fast for law enforcement to lay down spike traps ahead of Kimbra's car, and the stakes grew even higher when Kimbra began shooting at the cops trailing behind him. Determined to keep up with the suspect as he dangerously weaved in and out of traffic and blew through red lights, an officer from the Sebastian Police Department briefly crossed over into an oncoming traffic lane, something police very rarely do, and only when it's deemed absolutely necessary. As the chase continued into Brevard County, Kimbra narrowly avoided multiple accidents and put countless civilians at risk of being shot as he single-handedly fired his gun out the driver's window. Terrifying dashcam footage showed the felon's car cutting other drivers off, whipping across the road, and driving in the grass next to the shoulder before taking off into an overgrown field. The Sebastian officer stayed hot on his trail as the two vehicles worked their way around airplanes, cars, trailers, telephone poles, and other objects that were taking up space in their path. Finally, after driving almost 50 miles with the police in tow, Kimbra crashed through a gate and his car got stuck in a sand pit. The hostage, who was suffering from a gunshot wound, made a fast dash for freedom, but she was so weakened by her injuries that she just barely had the strength to crawl toward the police. Efforts to coax Kimbra into surrendering failed entirely, giving officers no other choice but to move on to another plan as he forced the remaining hostage into the woods at gunpoint in the pitch dark. With guidance from 3 helicopters hovering above, police in night vision gear continued to track the suspect. Kimbra had no plans to give himself or his hostage up, leaving law enforcement with no choice but to shoot him as soon as the chance came. Both hostages survived, and the officer's use of deadly force was ultimately deemed justified. Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey described Kimbra as an extremely dangerous individual who had plans to kill his hostages. Thankfully, that didn't actually happen, and the violence-prone repeat offender will never hurt another innocent person again. 7. Mark Gierowski. In February 2022, a Philadelphia man and self-proclaimed slacker, whose occupation on Facebook was listed as unemployed bum, was accused of stealing an ambulance at a hotel. 42-year-old Mark Gierowski allegedly grew combative with responding officers before getting behind the wheel of the stolen ambulance. He even tried mowing down a cop who opened fire and struck Gierowski twice in the leg and once in the torso. Despite his severe injuries, the suspect went on a 90-minute joyride in the emergency vehicle. The chase was pretty slow, topping out at only 25 miles per hour, yet Gierowski's driving was out of control. He hit at least 2 police cars throughout the lengthy pursuit and rode through intersections and parking lots with little to no concern about other drivers' safety. Helicopter footage showed the ambulance cruising down the street at a comfortable speed while being trailed by a long line of police cars. At one point, a tow truck driver tried to disable the ambulance by ramming into it. An ambulance tire popped, but Gierowski kept driving on 3 tires, while the busted wheel simply scraped against the pavement, causing sparks to fly in every direction. He finally came to a stop after running over a set of spike strips and popping yet another tire. The practically naked suspect was then taken to the hospital in critical condition thanks to his gunshot injuries. Gierowski was charged with a laundry list of crimes, including robbery, carjacking, aggravated assault, and more. While the outcome of the case is unclear, records show that he's currently serving time in prison. His reasons for stealing the ambulance remain a mystery, but his neighbors were reportedly shocked to learn of these seemingly out-of-character crimes. 6. Benjamin Plank. Serving eviction papers is an ordinary and often uneventful part of the job for members of the Oklahoma City Police Department, but the task took an unexpectedly terrifying turn in August 2022 for Sergeant Bobby Schwartz and Deputy Mark Johns. The pair were trying to serve an eviction notice to 35-year-old Benjamin Plank, but received no answer at the property's front door. As they walked around the house to knock at the back entrance, Plank allegedly shot at the deputies, who were both hit by the rogue gunfire. Plank then fled the scene in a pickup truck with a boat still attached to it, sparking a high-speed multi-agency pursuit along the nearby highway. In the meantime, emergency medical responders airlifted Schwartz and Johns to the hospital, where Schwartz sadly succumbed to his injuries. Police chased Plank along 3 separate interstate highways, reaching speeds of over 100 miles per hour as pursuing officers did everything in their power to try and stop the escaping driver. An attempt to disable Plank's vehicle with a pit maneuver failed, and when the suspect shot out of his truck at police officers, they decided it would be more appropriate to use deadly force considering the circumstances. A deputy who was ahead of the chase stood along the highway median with a gun and waited for Plank to pass him. He fired multiple shots but failed to hit Plank or stop his vehicle. Another officer pulled up behind Plank and fired shots through his windshield at the accused killer, but this also had little to no effect on the suspect's apparent determination to avoid capture. The boat the truck was towing could be seen wiggling back and forth as if the driver was on the verge of spinning out, but Plank somehow managed to regain control of the car. After barreling along the highway at life-threatening speeds for over 20 minutes, Plank exited at an Air Force base where he was immediately forced to stop at the entry gate. Officers then tackled him to the ground and tased him multiple times while handcuffing his arms and zip-tying his ankles together. Plank was charged with first-degree murder, but was declared incompetent to stand trial towards the start of 2023. The case has remained at a standstill ever since, as he undergoes treatment at a mental hospital in an attempt to restore his mental health. Although Plank said he understood the charges made against him, his attorneys claim he's actually incapable of fully grasping the nature of the allegations due to his delusional thinking, which has supposedly distorted his perception of his actions. The lawyers also revealed that Plank believes his family members and law enforcement are working together in a criminal conspiracy of sorts. If restoring the suspect to competency proves impossible, he'll remain hospitalized indefinitely. 5. Jackie Harris and Mayo Kean. While investigating several calls about tractor-trailer break-ins in October 2020, deputies in Coweta County, Georgia, caught the suspects red-handed at a local truck stop late one night. The surprised thieves quickly hopped into a U-Haul truck and fled the scene with deputies following close behind on their tail. Shortly into the chase, the truck hit another vehicle head-on. Seemingly unaffected by the collision, the suspect simply continued driving. Thankfully, the individuals in the car that got hit were okay. The pursuit continued onto a nearby interstate, hitting deadly speeds of 80 miles per hour as the driver skillfully managed to avoid hitting stop sticks 3 different times. In a police video of the chase, a deputy was heard telling his colleague over the radio that it would not be possible to successfully execute a pit maneuver to disable the truck. Considering the vehicle's size, trying to stall it out would be too dangerous to be worth the risk. Deputies also unsuccessfully tried to box the truck in, leaving them unsure of their next move as they tried figuring out how to get the vehicle to stop. With a busy traffic area coming up, the clock was ticking, and there was little time to end the chase safely. Left with no other options, a supervising deputy gave his men permission to disable the truck by shooting at it. A deputy sped up next to the U-Haul and fired 3 shots, but the truck didn't slow down. So the deputy pulled up alongside it again and fired 3 more times. Finally, the truck pulled onto the shoulder and scraped a concrete wall before coming to a complete stop. The suspects refused orders to get out of the vehicle, forcing the large number of law enforcement officers at the scene to approach the truck with their guns drawn and ready. The passengers finally listened, but the driver, Jackie Harris, had been shot in the back during the deputies' attempts to disable the truck. He was left paralyzed, but an investigation found that the deputies' use of deadly force was completely justified. Harris was charged with fleeing or attempting to elude police and aggravated assault. The passenger, Mayo Kean, was charged with entering an automobile with the intent to commit theft. According to the most recent updates on the case, the defendants are still awaiting trial. 4. Felix Lopez. In April 2021, on what started off as a normal Sunday afternoon in Dallas, Texas, a strange young man visited a fire station and asked a few questions about becoming a firefighter. Donning a mask, gloves, and a facial wound, he behaved in a manner that seemed weirdly off. Later identified by police as 19-year-old Felix Lopez, the visitor spoke with a firefighter named Paul Richter, who told NBC5 News that something about the teen made him very uncomfortable. Firefighters also said they'd seen Lopez lurking around the scene of an accident before and said that he asked them to call 911, claiming he'd been assaulted. The next morning, firefighters returned from a call to find that an ambulance was missing from their station's garage. They admitted that they hadn't seen the suspect while reporting the vehicle's disappearance to law enforcement, but considering the previous day's events, Lopez immediately came to mind as a suspect. Police spotted the ambulance not long after and tried to enact a traffic stop, but the driver refused to pull over. He drove erratically and even cut through an open field, prompting patrol officers to stop the pursuit for safety reasons, while a helicopter tracked the vehicle from overhead. Several law enforcement agencies attempted to stop the ambulance over the course of the next hour, but they were all unsuccessful. The chase finally ended after the thief drove over a set of spike strips. Lopez then tried to flee on foot, but was quickly taken into custody and eventually pleaded guilty to a second-degree felony theft charge. He was sentenced to serve 2 years of supervision, despite having a lengthy history of stealing vehicles. 3. Kyle Wagner. During one morning in early 2023, a woman woke up in the backseat of her family's car with a man she didn't recognize sitting behind the wheel. She had been sleeping in the car while her family went into a truck stop in Columbia County, Wisconsin, when the stranger hopped in and stole the vehicle. Later identified by police officers as a 51-year-old resident of New York State named Kyle Wagner, the man was driving at incredibly high speeds. According to court documents, he told the victim that there was a conspiracy and that he was actually rescuing her from people who wanted to kill both of them. Wagner refused to let the woman go, but didn't stop her from talking to the 911 dispatcher. The victim provided the operator with several updates on her location. In the meantime, her family members contacted police from back at the truck stop and gave the authorities the car's GPS tracking information. After driving across the county with no plans to stop, Wagner ran over a set of spike strips. Even after several of the tires deflated, he continued driving on the vehicle's rims. He went off the road not long after and kept going for as long as he possibly could before coming to a stop in a nearby parking lot. In police body cam footage of Wagner's arrest, the victim was heard telling a deputy that the suspect was crazy and refused to listen to reason. She seemed emotionally shaken up by the ordeal, but was thankfully physically unharmed. It was clear, based on the gratitude she expressed to the cops, that she was thankful to be out of that situation. While searching through Wagner's car back at the truck stop, police reportedly found methamphetamine with his belongings. Records show that he pleaded guilty to felony charges of fleeing/eluding and car theft, and he's currently serving time in prison with a projected release date set in 2027. 2. Raymond FR. 20-year-old Cameron Troyer was driving home in Wayne County, Ohio, one morning in May 2023 when he passed a man in a pickup truck who was driving very slowly. A few minutes later, he called 911 from inside his home in Chesterfield Township and told the dispatcher that the motorist had flown into a rage and decided to follow him home. Troyer claimed that the truck driver, 61-year-old Raymond FR, had tried rear-ending him and running him off the road after he passed the car. Now, FR was banging on Troyer's back door and challenging him to a fistfight. Security footage caught FR entering Troyer's driveway while looking up at the house and screaming, "Wanna have some fun?" out the window. The angry driver proceeded to yell, "Come on, let's play," before getting out of the truck and threatening to damage Troyer's Mustang. He then got back in his car, did a burnout in Troyer's driveway, left the vehicle again and yelled, "I've got all day." The fear in Troyer's voice was clear during the 911 call, as he told the dispatcher that the suspect was banging on his door. When the operator asked the young man if he knew what FR was wearing, he said he was scared to go look. Things took a terrifying turn when FR was heard threatening to hurt Troyer in the background noise of the call. He had actually entered the house, and Troyer was repeatedly ordering him to leave. Fearing for his life, Troyer aimed his rifle at the suspect, who finally retreated and carefully exited the house. Freer yelled out one last time at this point, this time challenging Troyer to shoot him, before getting into his truck and leaving the scene. Police finally caught up with Freer outside his house, where he continued to act agitated. He claimed that there was an ongoing issue with drivers speeding in the area, and accused Troyer of flying up and down the road at least a dozen times. Freer's wife told the police officers that if they didn't do something about the issue, she would. In body cam footage featured on the ID series Road Rage, an officer was heard telling the couple to calm down. Freer continued blaming Troyer for his own reckless behavior and got mad at an officer for not believing him when he claimed that the burnout he did in the young man's driveway was accidental. After interviewing both parties and reviewing Troyer's doorbell camera footage, police charged Freer with operation of a vehicle in willful disregard of the safety of others, trespassing, menacing, as well as disorderly conduct. The outcome of the case is currently unclear. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Cameron Jermichael Hopkins. In July 2023, a young woman named Carlia Jones was working the late shift at a restaurant in Fayetteville, Georgia, when an armed man entered her workplace and abducted her at gunpoint. During a 911 call, her co-workers identified the suspect as Carlia's ex-boyfriend, 20-year-old Cameron Jermichael Hopkins. They told police officers that Hopkins forced Carlia into a red Camaro and sped off. Officers were quick to spot the car, but the driver was not in the mood to cooperate with law enforcement. A high-speed chase ensued as the suspect led police across Fayette County into neighboring Clayton County. The pursuit ended after an officer carried out a successful pit maneuver on Hopkins' vehicle, causing it to spin out and stall. Before police could get into the car and rescue Carlia, the suspect fired his weapon several times, both inside the car and at officers. By the time Hopkins was forced out of the vehicle by an irritant that was dispersed inside, the young woman was already dead from multiple gunshot wounds. Hopkins faces multiple charges in several counties, including murder, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. Members of the public were outraged to learn that he was actually out on bond for allegedly abducting Carlia at gunpoint in a Walmart parking lot just 1 year earlier. The victim escaped by jumping out of the vehicle during the previous incident, but because a court decided that her abuser wasn't a big enough threat to keep locked up in jail, the young woman is now dead.
Number 10. Fleeing in an Uber. In 2021, an Uber driver in Miami was charged as being an accessory to a hit and run after helping the driver who committed the crime escape. Sharon Martinez Lazaro, 27 years old, drove her Dodge Charger directly at a homeless woman, nearly running her over, then hit a tree and crashed into a storefront. Sharon then got out of her vehicle wearing a long dress and heels, and she called for an Uber. The homeless woman picked up her belongings and ran away. Sharon took her suitcase from the trunk of her ruined car, then she sat patiently and waited for an Uber to come pick her up so that she could flee the scene of the crime. It took a while for the Uber to arrive, and a crowd of concerned citizens had gathered. As Sharon calmly walked away as if nothing had happened, the crowd yelled that she needed to stay and talk to the police. Sharon got into her Uber anyway, ignoring the angry mob, and the driver left the scene. The folks in the crowd had enough video evidence for the police to track down Sharon and the driver both. Sharon was arrested and charged with fleeing the scene of an accident and property damage. The driver, Bobby Stone, was charged with accessory after the fact. He knew she was trying to flee an accident, and he helped her do it anyway. Number 9. Walmart horror. For Justin Wade Gardner, 2023 started off violently. As Justin drove through the parking lot of a Walmart supercenter, he was overcome by a sudden urge to cause chaos. Justin smashed his car into 8 other vehicles and intentionally tried to run 2 women over. As he went through the parking lot, he purposely struck 2 pedestrians with his vehicle in an attempt to apparently murder them. Then, as he tried to flee the scene of his botched murders, he crashed into 8 different cars. 4 of the cars had people in them, but 4 weren't even moving. South Carolina state troopers believe Justin may have driven to the Walmart specifically to look for victims. One of his victims was Caitlin Hummel. She told local news that Justin drove into the car return stand, jarring it out of place but missing her. He hit the cart return so hard that it dislodged, bumping into Caitlin. Realizing he had missed his opportunity, the driver then went for another woman and hit her hard enough to knock the lady off her feet. There was an explosion of chaos in the Walmart parking lot, and Justin tried to flee the scene before he was pulled out of his vehicle by an angry mob. That was when he hit the 8 cars as he tried to pull off and escape. The police soon caught up to Justin and made the arrest. He has already been charged with 4 counts of assault and battery and trying to flee the scene of an accident. Number 8. Chris Soules. Chris Soules enjoyed a brief 15 minutes of fame when he starred in the 19th season of The Bachelor. Maybe it was a little longer than 15 minutes, but his fame has dried up ever since he tried to flee the scene of a fatal crash. In Iowa in 2017, Chris slammed his tractor-trailer into another vehicle, killing the other driver. Chris didn't immediately run away from the scene. First, he administered CPR to the victim, then he called 911, and he even waited for the paramedics to arrive. It was the police that seemed to freak Chris out because he made sure to leave before they arrived. But he had already given out his name, and so it didn't take long for the police to track him down and arrest him. This started a chain reaction of events that left Chris short millions of dollars and being sentenced to 2 years in prison. Chris originally managed to avoid a trial by demoting the charge from fleeing the scene of a deadly accident to leaving the scene of a personal injury accident. The lesser charge knocked 3 years off the potential prison sentence. Then a wrongful death lawsuit was placed against Chris by the family of the victim, Kenneth Mosher. Chris and his parents shelled out $2.5 million in damages. And finally, 2 years after that day in April, when Chris's radical driving killed a person, he was sentenced. Judge Andrea Dreyer gave the former bachelor a suspended sentence of 2 years in prison, meaning he wouldn't have to serve time behind bars. He was also given 2 years of probation and ordered to pay a fine of $625. Number 7. Self-snitching car. In 2015, Kathy Bernstein crashed into a truck and a van, then fled the scene. According to police, Kathy was driving her Ford vehicle along Northwest Prima Vista Boulevard in Port Lucie, Florida, when she rammed into the side of the truck and the van. Her airbag went off, hitting her in the face and obscuring her view. But she still hit the gas pedal and sped away from the scene. At first, it looked like Kathy was going to make a clean getaway. However, she was betrayed by her own vehicle. Kathy was on her way to an easy escape when her car's 911 assist system connected her car telephone directly to the police. The system is designed to respond to an accident and automatically call the cops. The whole point of the system is to send response vehicles in the case the driver is unconscious or unable to phone the authorities themselves. In this case, the car gave the cops Kathy's exact location and all her personal details. Now unintentionally on the phone with the 911 operator, Kathy tried to talk her way out of it. She insisted that she had not been involved in a car accident, saying her car had not been hit at all. However, police officers saw through her lies. They already knew an accident had taken place and that someone had fled the scene, and they had her exact location. The police met Kathy at her own home, where her damaged Ford car was parked outside, with the airbag still inflated. Even still, Kathy tried to deny that she was in any kind of hit and run. She claimed she hit a tree, even though she had damaged the front and back of her vehicle. In the end, there was just no way for Kathy to talk her way out of it. She was charged with hit and run and taken to St. Lucie County Jail. Number 6. Rundown in Vegas. In September of 2016, a man was wanted for questioning in connection to a shooting. As the individual was driving his vehicle through Las Vegas, detectives tried to stop him in the area along US 95. It was believed that several days earlier the man got into a shootout in a mobile home park 2 miles, 3.2 kilometers away, and almost killed somebody. There was no warrant out for the individual's arrest, but detectives were fairly certain he was the man who pulled the trigger. When they tried to pull him over, he panicked. And that was when everything went horribly wrong. The man immediately hit the gas and tried to escape the police. He led them on a brief chase northbound on US 95, got off on Boulder Highway, and made his way back onto the freeway. That was when he lost control of his vehicle and smashed into a wall. With his car ruined, the man got out on foot and tried to flee across the northbound lane. As he ran, he was mowed down by a semi-tractor trailer and killed. All he needed to do was stop his car and let the police talk to him, but instead he ran out into traffic and died. Number 5. Losing the loot. A man walked into a Mike's Sub restaurant in 2018 in Rancho Bernardo, San Diego, pistol-whipped an employee and ran off with some cash. But the thief's getaway didn't go quite as planned. He dropped his loot as he tried to flee the scene and wound up getting away with nothing. The incident began a little after 10:45 p.m. An employee was closing up the restaurant when the suspect entered through the back door. The robber forced the employee to open the cash register, then forced the employee to open the safe. The thief received a whole heap of money in an envelope, hit the employee with his gun for no reason, then took off out the back door. The victim suffered a nasty laceration to their head but was otherwise okay, minus the trauma. But then the thief's whole plan fell apart. As he attempted to flee, he ran straight into a pillar, dropping his money everywhere. The suspect was so panicked to escape that he left his money scattered on the ground and took off across a pedestrian bridge. Last we heard, the police never even caught him. He wore dark pants, black running shoes, a black bandana, and a black hoodie pulled tight around his face. He may have escaped without facing any charges, but he left behind his stolen cash. Number 4. Driving the dollar van. In March of 2020, a man driving a dollar van plowed his vehicle directly into the back of a cyclist. The accident happened near the intersection of Avenue U and Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn around 5 p.m. It's not clear why the driver hit the cyclist, but he definitely tried to get away after. He slammed into the back of the bike, sending the cyclist flying over his handlebars to be crushed under the wheels of the minibus. Then 42-year-old Kwadwo Fozu tried to make a desperate escape. He hit the gas, hightailed it out of there, but was immediately apprehended by witnesses. Good Samaritans saw what happened, blocked the guy in, and held him under citizen's arrest until the police showed up. According to the cops, the cyclist was in critical condition, but not deceased. The driver was booked and charged with aggravated unlicensed operation of a vehicle. He didn't even have the proper license to be driving the dollar van. He was also charged with leaving the scene of an accident and failure to use caution. Number 3. Moped Fireball. In September of 2022, a man on a moped tried to flee the scene of a crime, got into a police chase, and drove his moped into the side of an NYPD patrol car in Queens. The accident happened in the early hours of Friday morning, following a shootout. As the suspect fled the scene of the shooting, police gave chase. They got into a position where they could block traffic and box the driver of the moped in. But instead of slowing down or trying to avoid the blockade, the guy on the moped drove straight into the side of a cop car and exploded in a massive ball of fire. The moped's gas tank ruptured and the whole thing exploded on impact. The driver was propelled over the handlebars and into the police cruiser like a crash test dummy. After that, the suspect curled up on the ground in a fetal position as he started to catch fire. Good Samaritans and NYPD officers pulled the driver out of the flames, likely saving his life. He was then taken to the hospital and treated for minor injuries. The moped was left scorched and ruined, and the NYPD car was black and charred, as if it had been hit by a meteor. Number 2. To steal a catalytic converter. In Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, a suspected catalytic converter thief accidentally ran over his partner as the pair tried to flee the scene of a crime. It happened around 6 in the morning on a Saturday in late 2022. Pennsylvania State Police received a report of a pedestrian accident. When troopers arrived, eyewitnesses said 2 men tried to strip a catalytic converter from a car outside a man's house. They were interrupted when the owner came outside and confronted them. Both suspects tried to flee the scene, and that was when one of them ran over their partner in a pickup truck. As if the getaway couldn't have gone any worse, one of the thieves left his injured partner behind. The one that ran over the other one took off and left his body on the ground for the police to find. The cops identified the injured suspect as James Edward Snyder, who was taken to the hospital before being charged. The other one got away, and there have been no reports of his capture. Number 1. Big rig hit and run. In 2016, the driver of a big rig found himself in serious trouble after running a red light in Vernon, California, and crashing into a vehicle. The big rig went straight through the red light at the intersection near 37th Street and Santa Fe Avenue just after 3 in the morning. Vernon police say the driver collided with a pickup truck, hitting it so hard the pickup got lodged underneath the big rig's trailer. The driver desperately wanted to escape, but wasn't getting very far with a crushed truck stuck under the trailer. So they took the time to unhook the trailer from the cab, then they made their getaway. The driver left the trailer sitting on the crushed truck and fled the scene. When the police arrived, they were shocked to find 2 people stuck in the truck and trapped by the detached trailer. The driver was removed and transported to the USC Medical Center. Unfortunately, though, the passenger of the truck was already deceased. Police found the big rig shortly after, about a mile from the scene. They released the name of Guillermo Ortiz Jr. as the main person of interest, although it was never confirmed who was in the driver's seat. The Vernon detective sergeant called the driver's actions brazen, saying he could have easily stayed and helped the people in the pickup, but instead he took the time to unhitch the trailer and take off.
Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend 10 hours stuck in traffic on a hot summer day or pay a $200 car repair bill? Let us know in the comments below.